as you're sitting down, I just wanted to let you know, you see on the screen, is a book that my father was working on that we're just releasing today, that my father started working on before he passed away in Africa 2 years ago. So for 40 years, my father taught the book of Joshua at African Bible colleges. He taught it on the radio that went across the continent. He taught the book of Joshua for 40 years. And he started to write it, put it into a manuscript. And about halfway through, he went home to heaven. And so over the last year, my mom and I finished the manuscript, being detectives, getting his radio recordings and getting his class notes and his sermon notes. And we finished Faith in Action, God in Motion. And my mother's here this morning. Nell, can you stand? Let's welcome her back to the Grove. I keep telling her this is her home away from home. So we have hardcovers and soft covers. Nell, my mother Nell, will be in the lobby after the service. Take one home with you. It's also on Barnes & Noble online or Amazon online as well. But that's Faith in Action, God in Motion. All right, well, this is Veronica. You all know Veronica already, my wife.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. And as you heard Paul say earlier, we're celebrating 20 years of the Grove, and starting right now. So January 2nd, we arrived here. Veronica, what was that like 20 years ago, moving to Chandler with our 4 sons?
Well, if you were here in 2002, you'll know that there were homes just everywhere being built out here. We built a home 2 miles south of here, and there were no grocery stores, no gas stations, no Target, and no churches. So we felt like we were here for just the time as this. And we also, there were lots of cows everywhere. It was very smelly. There were lots of cornfields.
Hey, we love the cows.
And our boys were all little. They were quite upset about all the cows and the smells. And they would say, why couldn't we live in Tempe with all of our friends, and our friends, the Bradleys, who they were friends with. But we knew God had us here for this time. And just as Jesus said to his disciples in John chapter 4, he said, open your eyes and look. The fields are ripe for harvest. And that's how we felt out here with no churches, that the fields were ripe for harvest, for souls.
All right, and our sons thought Tempe was the epicenter of civilization. Okay, love it. So what was it like starting a church? We had never done that before. What was it like for you?
Well, because we were a small church of like 100 people meeting in a school in our neighborhood, we were desperate for people. So anybody that walked through those gym doors at Santan K8, we would pounce on them, and we would invite them for lunch. We would try to get to know them, smother them, and they probably thought it was a little creepy, I won't lie.
Like a cult?
And yes, but we just felt so blessed to be in our community starting a church, right, with our neighbors and all of our kids' teachers at the school. And it was hard work. It took a lot of hustle. I will say, if you've ever planted a church, you know that there's a lot of actual physical hard work of moving in all the chairs and the toys, and there would be goldfish crackers smashed in the carpet. We would have to vacuum them up before school started on Monday morning, but it was a great experience.
Now, they say in church planting that every pastor's wife will either do children's ministry or women's ministry. I think you did both the first year.
I think I did.
Yeah.
We had about 400 homes in our subdivision. So I printed up flyers. I wanted to start a home Bible study for the women in my neighborhood to get to know them and hopefully get them to come to our church. So I went door to door trying to meet all of the women and having them over.
And then what was your first role in our new church?
Oh, okay. Well, yes. So I was an elementary school teacher before moving here. And I soon realized we had so many young families, we had so many kids at our church that we needed a children's pastor, but we couldn't afford one because we were brand new. So I felt like it was a perfect role for me to be able to help out with children's ministry.
So these last 20 years have been incredible for both of us, but what have they meant to you?
Well, it's just been, for me, I'll use the word magical, just to be able to, for God to use us and for me to be able to make so many friendships and relationships. I have to give a shout out to my Flourish girls. The women here at the Grove are incredible. I love them so much. It's probably the highlight for me. And I would say if any of you women need friendships and want to grow in your faith, come. This is the perfect time. We're starting this Wednesday at we meet in this place, in this worship house at 9:30 in the morning or at 7 at night. And come join us. We're just starting this week. So it has been a great 20 years, and I look forward to the next 20 years.
All right. Well, can we thank Veronica for sharing a little bit this morning? Thank you. So as we have on the screen, we're titling our teaching series this month, Just Getting Started. Because today I want to take a look back, maybe over the last 20, to spend a moment celebrating what God has done here and talking about the passions that have been lived out through the Grove over the last 20. Next Sunday, I want to talk about a vision for the next 20 years because I do think that we're just getting started. So like Veronica said, we moved here on January 2nd, 20 years ago. We were supposed to arrive on January 1st, by the way, but when our plane was about to take off in Johannesburg, someone saw a rat on the plane, and so we all had to disembark and spend another night in Africa. So the rat got us here late. Anyway, so 20 years ago, we moved here because I'd been teaching at African Bible College and working on my PhD for about 3 years, but I missed the pastorate. I felt that God had called me to be a pastor, and I missed it. And I felt I was ready to come back and do that. And so I had started calling friends who worked in churches saying, hey, do you have a job for Palmer Chinchen? Do you know anyone that would hire this guy? And I was sending out my resumes and contacting friends. And I called one friend. His name is Brett Johnson. And Brett and I had worked together at a church, Granada Heights in La Mirada, California. And I said, Brett, help me find a job. And he says, Palmer, here's what you need to do. He said, you need to plant a church. And I literally said to him, I said, plant a church. I said, Brett, church planting is for losers. That's what I told him. Because I pictured, people who couldn't get a job out of seminary. They would say to their friends, hey, let's meet in my apartment complex, clubhouse for church. It's not really church, Brett. And he says, no, you don't understand it. He said, the sharpest people in the country are planting churches. And then he got me with this. Then he said, when you plant a church, you get to shape the church the way you've always dreamed it could be. And that really got me because I had ideas for a kind of church that I had never seen before. And so after Brett said that, I couldn't stop thinking about his thoughts that you get to plant a church, start a church the way you've always dreamed it could be. And so Veronica and I started dreaming of a new kind of church, the kind of church that would lift up the least and the last, the kind of church that would embrace people of every race, the kind of church that would react to and stop injustice, the kind of church that would care about the poor and the oppressed and free them, the kind of church that would be and show Jesus to their own community. And so when we moved here, that's the kind of church that we were thinking about. When we landed, the first person that I found was my good friend Gary Bradley. We had known each other from Biola University, and I said, Gary, we need to go talk to your dad. I said, if I'm going to start a church, I need your dad's help, because his father had built 3 churches in Tempe, the epicenter of civilization. And so we went to meet with his father, and I had plans that I had drawn up for a church campus, and it was a church and a college, and I showed it to Elmer Bradley, and I said, hey, so Elmer, what do you think of this? Can you help me build this church? And he says, well, Palmer, you're showing me plans for a parcel of land that you don't own, and you have it dimensioned to that. He said, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but sure, I'll help you. And I said, well, yeah, Elmer, thank you, because I thought God might show up and give us a piece of land that we could build on. So after Elmer agreed to do that, I knew we needed a place to meet. And so just 2 miles out south of here, we moved into a brand new subdivision, and just over our neighborhood wall, a brand new school was being built. It wasn't even done yet, Santan K-8. And so I found the principal of the school. His name is Frank Narducci. And I went in his office, and it was a Thursday afternoon. I remember it was a Thursday because I said, Frank, I'm here to see if our new church could meet in your school. And he said, oh, Palmer, you should have come 2 days ago. He said, on Tuesday, there was another pastor in here. And he said, I kind of promised him that he could have our school to meet in. I was like, oh, well, Frank, can I tell you a little bit about our vision for this church? And he said, sure. So I took like 45 minutes of his time telling him what our missional church would be like, that we would be for our community, in our neighborhood, changing lives, caring about families, and then reaching the world. And then I also told him, I said, I have 4 sons that'll be in kindergarten all the way up to junior high in your school this year. And when I was done, he said, he had one question, and it reminded me, I saw Frank 3 days ago, and he reminded me of the question that he asked me. He said, Palmer, if you meet in our school, will you build your new church in our community? And I said, we will. And he said, well, if you promise you'll do that, you can have the school. The other guy already has a church. He just wanted a second campus. You can have it. And so he let us here. By the way, 2 weeks ago, Frank Narducci was named District Superintendent of Chandler Unified School District. How do you like that? Can we applaud that? I think God blesses the lives of good people. So after we had a place to meet, I spent every Monday that first month driving around this area looking for a parcel that we could purchase to build a church on. And like Veronica said, there were new subdivisions everywhere, but no churches anywhere. And so it wasn't long before I found a sign right out here on Gilbert Road. Gilbert was just a 2-lane road, no existing houses at the time, no shopping center, no freeway. And I saw this little sign that said Howard Black and a phone number. And so I called Howard and I said, Howard, you have land for sale. How many acres? He says, 20 acres. I said, that's perfect. That's what we're looking for. People had said, you can build a church on 1 acre. And I said, no, we're dreaming more. I think God can do more than that. And so I said, Howard, well, how much? He said, $100,000 an acre. And he said, Palmer, just, that's firm. These are farmers. They don't negotiate. That's the price. The problem is, Howard didn't know that I grew up in Africa, and we haggle over everything. He didn't know I spent the weekends in African markets arguing with vendors over the price of roasted corn, okay? So I knew how to negotiate. So I said, all right, sure, Howard, that's it. And so we write up an offer, we give it to him, and it was a strong offer. $60,000. Howard was salty. He was like, man, he said, I don't even know if I can. I said, you have to present that. That's a law. You got to show it to him. So he shows it to him and he comes back. He says, all right, they said they'll take $90,000. Palmer, that's it, not a penny more. We came back at 70. I said, how about 70? He said, Palmer, I told you that was it. I said, no, it's 70. So they came back at 80,000. We landed at 75. What do you think of that? And we can applaud that. So that's just God, worked on the hearts of the Chappelle family. And then after we had this pistachio, all these pistachio trees, we're looking for a name for this new church. And I knew we needed a cool name, right? And I had friends in San Diego with really awesome churches with names like The Flood. Or there's the church, The Rock. And I was like, we need that kind of name, like The Valley, The Desert, something like The Tumbleweed, something like that. And so, but then when we bought all of these pistachio trees, I called my dad because he had been a pear grower in California before he moved to Africa. And I said, Dad, so are we an orchard or are we a grove? And he says, well, it's pretty simple. He said, orchards are primarily usually fruit trees. He said, groves are nut trees. And you have a tree of nuts, so you're the grove. And so that's who we are. And so my dad helped with that. And so that's the name, the Grove. Well, when we started with a very small staff, just 3 of us, and Paul Gunther was one of them. When we started meeting every Monday, we didn't have offices, so we'd meet in the Barnes & Noble down the street, and we'd sit between the cases of books. And on Monday, we called it our dream day. It was just to dream about the future of this church and what this church could become. And so as we started to dream, on one Monday, I said, let's write down the names of all the words. Let's write down the words that will define who we are. Now, on our list, we already knew that we'd be a church that was committed to teaching the Bible, to worship, to prayer, to small groups. But on top of that, we wanted to expand our church vocabulary, our ecclesial vocabulary. And so we started writing down words that we had never seen associated with church, like change makers and missional and creatives, innovative, authentic, tribal, collective. And so that list became kind of the values that drove this church for the last 20 years. I want to take our time this morning to look at a few of these words, just several of them, and share how they've kind of shaped who we've become. The first word is the word missional. And our missional text has always been Romans chapter 10, verse 14 and 15. Let me read that. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And how can they believe in the one whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can anyone preach unless they are sent? Because as it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. Let me go back to verse 15, the start of it. And how can they preach unless they are sent? Do you see what Paul is saying here? Paul is reminding us that the first step is to be sent. So one of the things we've been doing for 20 years is trying to remind everyone who comes through these doors, trying to remind everyone of your sentness, that you live on mission every day, that you are sent by God first to your neighbor and your neighborhood. You're sent to your community. You're sent to your workplace and your school or your hospital or wherever your place of business is, and then you are sent to the world. And so at the Grove, we've always been trying to remind everyone of their missional calling. When Paul and Melinda first moved here, you heard him talk about that. One of the first things they did was start a nonprofit called Live Love. And the idea was to love our community first. And so Paul and Melinda met with the mayor of Chandler, and they asked the mayor, well, how can we love Chandler? In what ways, what neighborhood can we reach here? And so the mayor identified a neighborhood that has now become our Live Love neighborhood where we could pour into and love. In fact, Paul and Melinda physically moved to live there last week. But some of my favorite moments at the Grove have been our Live Love days. Over the years, we've done Live Love days, and I remember one Live Love day, we had counted more than 500 people from the Grove had come to volunteer in this one neighborhood. And they were repainting houses, fixing appliances, spreading granite in front yards, pouring concrete. And then alongside them were firefighters. We had firemen who came with their ladders to paint houses. They were using their ladder trucks to trim trees. And then we had a pile of Target employees. I don't know who recruited the Target employees, but they came in their red polo shirts and khaki pants, and they're getting paid by the hour to serve Jesus Christ. How do you like that? And that was, we can applaud that. It was amazing. But being missional means that, and as we talk about what does it mean to be missional, it means to live incarnational. Missional first means to be incarnational, because in the same way that Jesus came to be God among us, you're called to go and show Jesus to your neighborhood first. That's why I say missional means incarnational. Missional also means hospitality. Maybe you've never seen those words put together before, but missional living means opening your home to the other, opening your home to someone who is different than you. Jesus says this. He says, it's very easy to open your home and your heart to people who are like you, who look like you, who talk like you, and who agree with you, but it's really hard to open your heart and your life to people who are different. That's the challenge of missional living. That's why I say being missional means hospitality, because you just don't open your home when you invite the other in, and whether it's a neighbor or a coworker or someone you've just gotten to know. But it means that you also open your heart. It's a very divine act. It's a very holy act. Because in the same way that God has opened his heart to you and me and everyone else, when you invite someone into your home, you also open your heart the same way God does to the other. That's why I say hospitality is a holy act. The reason hospitality and living missionally, and missional means hospitality, is a reason we have these big dining room tables around the Grove. Because you've heard me say this so many times, that the tables are here because, in my opinion, Jesus' favorite metaphor for the kingdom of heaven on earth was a dinner and a table, a big banquet table. And at this table, people of every background, every race, every nationality are welcome. And these tables remind us of that the ground is level. The table is level. And at the Grove, we want everyone who comes through these doors, that regardless of your education or your social status or your nationality or your immigration status or race, you are wanted and you are welcomed here. You belong here. That's what those tables mean. And after our first year, by the way, in this worship house, having the tables wasn't satisfying enough because we never really have a meal here, right? Hospitality should include food. We take communion, but communion never fills you up. Let's be honest about that. It's just a little bit of a cracker or bread. And so we decided, and so Paul, Gunther, and I, and some of our staff planned a one-table dinner. Where we wanted to have one table where we could seat everyone from the Grove. The second year we did it, we had more than 1,000 people sign up. So we built a 1,000-foot table that went from one end of our pistachio grove to the other. And the dinner was going well. I mean, the table filled up. We had pizza. We had pizza in the gym for the kids because we said there wasn't enough room for the kids. But when the kids saw how awesome it was down here, they started to escape. And they started showing up. I went and found our children's pastor. I said, hey, you got to keep the kids in. She said, I know, I have guards at the door, but they're running around the guards. They're getting out. It literally was happening. And then she reminded me, she said, Jesus said, let the little children come to me. And so we just gave up and let all the kids come down as well. Because it's good and it's beautiful. But that's why I say, hospitality. Missional means hospitality. Missional also means go. Missional means that my calling is somewhere else. The Grove has always been an outward-focused church. We've always wanted to help people rediscover their sentness. I've worked in other churches. I've been in a lot of other churches. And at most churches, you hear the preachers say, pray for your missionary, which is good. You hear the preachers say, donate to your missionaries, which is very good. But what I never heard any preacher ever say was, you are a missionary. And at the Grove, we want to remind you as often as we can that you are missionary. Now, missions is not a department of our church. You live on mission every day. That's what it means to be a missional church. And we go, like I said, first to our neighbors in our neighborhood, and then we go to the world. So if you've been here for any length of time, you know that we try to live out our sentness. We are a church that has been sending people out, thousands of people out for 20 years. One of our first trips that we did after Paul Gunther joined our staff was we had a goal to send 100 people to Africa in one summer. It felt impossible. We had 120 people sign up. And we had one group doing trauma counseling in Uganda with former boy soldiers, child soldiers under the Lord's Resistance Army. We had another group in Malawi working with some of the million orphans of AIDS. And then in Liberia, we had a group that was helping to rebuild a college, our African Bible college that was destroyed during the Civil War. So when the teams went out, I just have to tell you about one couple, Shalene and Jarrett. So Shalene was a teacher at the school we met at down the street, Santan K8. She was one of my son's teachers. And so she and her husband signed up. Shalene went to Malawi to serve. Jared went to Liberia to serve. When they came back, and she served in an orphanage there, and he helped build a college, and he also served in an orphanage in Liberia. When they got back to America, they both said to each other, we need to adopt. They already had 3 of their own kids, but they both said, we need to adopt. And so they flew to Ghana, Africa. By the way, Liberia and Malawi do not allow international adoptions, but Ghana does. So they flew to Ghana, and they went to an orphanage, and they met 2 twin sisters. And they adopted these twin sisters, brought them back, and for the last 15 years, these twins have been a part of the Grove. It's been a beautiful part of our story. I think in large part, that's what missional living looks like. It's good and it's beautiful. So the idea of missional has been at the core of who we are. Here's a second word that has defined our church. It's the word tribe. And you maybe are thinking, well, how in the world are we a tribe? I like the idea of tribe, because tribes have power to do so much more than the individual. But a lot of times, yes, we're a church, so don't misunderstand me. We're a church, but many times in our vernacular, church simply means a place. Church can just mean a building or an institution. And as a church, at the Grove, we want everyone to know that we are a movement, that we have mass and we have momentum, and we can get things done because of our collective power. And so that's why I like the term tribe. By the way, the Hebrew people, when they talked about their identity, they usually talked about the idea of tribes, because not only do tribes have power to get things done, but tribe implies family. Tribes mean I have your back. If you have a problem, your problem is my problem. That's why I like the idea that we are a tribe, not just a church. When I was growing up in Liberia, West Africa, we grew up with the Sapo tribe. And the Sapo people have a saying. They say this. They say, one rock cannot cook rice. That's what they say. And then they say, you need three. They say, because here's their logic. They say, if you want to cook a pot of rice, you build a fire, right? And you have a fire, and you put one rock next to the fire, but when you put the pot of water and rice on it to boil, the pot's just going to fall off one rock. And even if you put two rocks next to the fire, that doesn't work. The pot will fall off. So it takes three rocks to cook rice. They say you have to have three rocks. And if you guys have three rocks, then you can get things done. It's the same with tribe and community, that we get things done. We can do so much more collectively. In Romans chapter 10, in our text that we read earlier, I want to go back to verse 15, where Paul says this: how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. And that idea of good news, for so many Christians and so many churches, they only talk about preaching the good news. At the Grove, we've tried to help everyone understand that the good news is something we talk about, we teach it, and we preach it. But the good news of Jesus Christ is also something that we do. It's why we care about extreme poverty. It's why we care about oppression. It's why we try to lift up the least and the last. That's why we care about the poor. Because the good news of Jesus Christ is also something that we do. In order to help people understand this and get this, years ago we held our first Barefoot Sunday, because I didn't think people at the Grove were convinced that millions of people walk barefoot every day. Over a billion people, I think it's 1.5 billion people live in extreme poverty on less than $2 a day. And so we planned our first Barefoot Sunday. Some of you might remember this. We asked everyone to leave their shoes on the stage, and we would give them away in Africa. But here's the rest of the challenge. The rest of the challenge was spend the rest of the day barefoot so you can feel what it's like, so you can feel the shame of going shopping barefoot and get all the strange looks. Feel the pain of mowing your lawn barefoot and see what that feels like, or going jogging barefoot. The first Barefoot Sunday, we did it between services. I started getting texts from people. One was from a friend of mine named DJ, and he said, Palmer, he said, you shouldn't have told us to go barefoot. He said, we just got kicked out of a restaurant. And I said, DJ, A, thank you for going barefoot today, but who kicked you out? And you know what? I was thinking this. He says, I don't want to mention the name of the restaurant because you guys love the restaurant, and that's fine. But he says this, yeah, he said, I don't know where to go eat now because we just got kicked out of Denny's. And I said, so my text back was, Denny's, why you do at Denny's, I said, try Payway. They've never kicked me out. And so every year, if there's ever a Barefoot Sunday, go to Payway. They've never kicked me out there. But that's the shame. That's what happens sometimes. But as a tribe, we have accomplished so much more than I ever thought one church, one movement of Jesus Christ ever could. Here's a third word that has shaped and defined us. It's the word creatives. We've always wanted to be a place of creatives, a place where there's innovation. Paul uses this word. If we go back to Romans 10, he says, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. I love how he talks about how beautiful are the feet. Maybe no one has ever talked about your feet as being beautiful. But at the Grove, we've always wanted to be a center for the arts, a place where there was creativity and innovation. And the thing is, I think when I talk about being creatives and why we lift up the arts and the artists, is because so many times in churches and among Christians, we can only think that worship only happens when we sing. Well, singing is a beautiful expression of worship, but it's not the only expression of worship. King David showed us in the Bible that poetry is an expression of worship. Paul in Romans says, by looking at creation, the creation around you, you will see God as a reflection of our worship to him, reflected in creation. And so when artists paint, when we write poetry, when we record music, those are all expressions of worship to God, or can be if they're intended for that. And so we built a recording studio. And by the way, I love that right now, Andrea Hughes is recording her first album. Grove Worship is recording its first album. I love that we are composing and recording here. Speaking of arts and artists, one of our artists here at the Grove, her name is Barb Gomez. And just this week, Barb registered 35 Justice College students for her introduction to art class. How do you like that? And we can applaud that. Barb's doing something huge. It was our first, by the way, we capped it out. We'd have probably 30 more that want to sign up if we let them. When we were building this space, we wanted it to be a place that was innovative and creative. So we built it in the round. We said we want people to be able to see faces when you worship, not just the back of heads. As we're building this room, I had person after person say, Palmer, have you been in a space in the round to worship? I said, no, I never have. And so they would say, how do you know it's going to work? And I said, I don't know if it's going to work. And so they'd say, well, what's your plan B? And I'd say, well, there is no plan B. We're just going to stick with it. And so we are. And so for 20 years, God has been using our efforts here, whether it's creative, missional. And here's the last word that I want to share with you today. It's a word, education. Because from the time we landed, we've been committed to spiritual growth, to spiritual formation, to growing lifelong learners. I think I learned the value of education and higher education. I know I learned it from my parents. Because for the last 40 years, my parents, Jack and Nell, have been leading 3 universities in Africa. And so when we came here, one of our first hires was a pastor of spiritual formation, because spiritual formation matters. We want to be a place where people are growing and knowing Jesus Christ more and more. Our spiritual formation text that we've always grabbed onto is Ezra 7:10. You can look at it in your Bibles with me. And Ezra says this, or it's on the screen. The gracious hand of God was on him, was on Ezra, because Ezra had devoted his life to studying the law of God, to preaching, and to teaching all of its laws and regulations to the people of Israel. And so we, for the last 20 years, have been committed to growing people spiritually and forming them spiritually. Over the last 40 years, like I said, and over the last 20 years that I've been at the Grove, I've watched African Bible College graduate hundreds, now thousands of graduates. And over the last 20 to 40 years, or at least 20 years that I've been at the Grove, I've seen their graduates become teachers and principals. I've seen their graduates become pastors and church planters. I've seen them become leaders of nonprofits and business leaders. I've seen them become national broadcasters on radio and TV. Today we have 5 graduates of African Bible College in Malawi who are members of parliament. A lot of people are saying that the next president of Malawi will be a graduate of African Bible colleges. But over the last 20 years, as I've watched these graduates shine in Africa, I've thought, why can't we have graduates like that in Chandler, Arizona? Why can't, at the Grove, we be raising up high school principals and college professors and founders of nonprofits and business leaders and pastors and church planners and global change makers and maybe even the next president of our country? And so because of that, we started Justice College. And so this last fall, we finally launched our college that we've been talking about for 20 years. And I don't know if you've heard me say this, but we had 67 students enroll this fall. And of those 67 students, they're from 15 different countries. Here's a few of them. Their families are from Nigeria, Lebanon, Congo, Liberia, Brazil, Tanzania, Rwanda, Gambia, Mexico, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Burundi, and then we have 2 twin sisters from Ghana, from an orphanage in Ghana. Can we applaud that? And their names are Rita and Rachel Baxter. Can I welcome them up right now? Rita, come up. So Rita and Rachel were 2 of the first to tell me that they were coming to Justice College. This was before we were even incorporated. You guys were still in high school, remember that, and said, we're coming to Justice College. Well, first, welcome Rachel and Rita. Rachel, first, could you start by telling us the rest of your adoption story? So Shalene and Jarrett went to your orphanage in Ghana. They adopted the 2 of you. What happened next?
After we've been here for about 3 years, a random lady from America.
Okay, so a random lady from America. This is where our story's going. All right, keep going.
She ran into a little girl named Deborah, which was our oldest sister, and Deborah had asked her, do you know my 2 sisters back home in America? They got adopted.
Wow.
And she contacted our mom, and our mom said, yes, that's their sister.
Wow, that's your sister. And so what Shalene and Jared do next?
We started the adoption process for Deborah, and when they went to Africa to pick her up and bring her home, they saw Abigail, and she asked, are those the girl's sisters? And they said, yes, that's Rita, Rachel, and Deborah's sister.
And so what they do with Abigail?
They ended up adopting her as
So
well.
here's all 4 of them here. Is that amazing, everybody? Unbelievable. So all 4 sisters through a random American woman.
Yeah.
That's odd. And then I love that when you guys came here, you started going to school where? Were you?
Santan.
Santan KA, right where our church started. And so, Rita, one of the things that I know that you and Rachel have been talking about is writing a book about your story. So what is it? What do you want that book to say?
So first off, I want to start off by saying the title of our book is God's Power and Glory, because he's worked in like so many ways in our lives and unexpectedly too. And with that, he's just worked in so many ways in our lives.
I love that you use the word unexpected, because who would expect that once a family adopts twins, there's another sister and then another sister, and manage to bring them all to Chandler. I love it, thank you. So this was your first fall at Justice College. We are just getting the wheels off the ground. What has it been like for you, Rita?
It's been amazing. I've made amazing friends, especially from working at the coffee shop. And with my photography business, there's this one class that I really loved, which was business, which had my business teacher who is Chandler Yelton.
Chandler Yelton. You almost said favorite business teacher, but I know Scott Swanson took offense to that after the last service. But yes, he's a phenomenal, and he's here this service, so thank you, Chandler. Can we thank Chandler and all of our staff that teaches here? Thank you. Love it. He's done a fantastic job. What has the first semester been like for you, Rachel?
It's been amazing. One of my amazing classes was college composition, and the teacher happened to be our principal from Santan.
Barb Klawinski. How do you like that? So their principal from Santan also taught at Justice College. I mean, that's incredible. And yeah, let's applaud that. Only God puts those things together. And I love, you said that in college composition, you are also able to get a start on writing your book. I really like that. So when you graduate from Justice College, Rachel and Rita, what are some of the things that you want to do with your degree?
For me, I would like to study abroad with Justice College to help orphans, to be their mentor, because when we were orphans, we didn't have that. So I would like to start that junior year of college with the study abroad of Justice College.
That's beautiful, Rachel. I love that. How about you, Rita? What are your plans?
With me, I want to put photography into my faith, so I'd be traveling out of the country, doing missions, and study abroad with the Justice College as well. And I just want to take pictures and tell a story that many people wouldn't see here.
Love that. Love that you want to tell stories through photography and you want to go back and mentor orphans because they don't have anyone to talk to. You're right. That's a beautiful story. Can we thank Rachel and Rita Baxter? Thank you so much. Well, church, as we close this morning, I want to invite you into this movement that God has started at the Grove. We're just getting started, but we want you to be a part of it. But there's one big important step that if you're going to be a part of what God is doing here, if you're going to be a part of changing our neighborhoods and our cities and our world for Jesus Christ, there's one big step. And the step is you first have to give your life to Jesus Christ. And if you're sitting here this morning and you've never said, God, I'm giving you my whole life, it's yours, take it, use it, I want to invite you to give your life to Jesus Christ first. Because living on mission every day, being sent out as missionary, it starts first with giving your life to Christ. So church, would you bow your heads with me? And if you've never prayed these words, this prayer before, pray it with me. God, I need a Savior. And I believe that your Son, Jesus Christ, came from heaven to earth to live among us in our neighborhoods. And then he died on the cross for my sins, but then he rose again so that I can live forever. I believe that, God. And today, I give my life to you to be the king of my life. God, use my life for good. Use my life for your kingdom to change this world for you. I ask that in Jesus' name. Amen.